Hey guys, welcome to another video. In a previous video about vulcanized rubber molds, it was asked that we do one about liquid rubber molds. So this is the product I used. This is Castaldo Liqui-Cast liquid jewelry RTV molding rubber. This is not a silicone rubber. This is something else. I really don't know exactly what it is, but it's a two-part, just like other RTV silicones. It's just the ratio is a little different. We're going to talk a little bit about when this is the right stuff to use versus, say, a vulcanized rubber mold. So this is the product here that we took a mold of. Later on in the video you'll see. This is a carving wax base. It has sterling silver filigree wire super glued onto it, and basically the original maker of this doesn't want to do the filigree, all the soldering work and stuff. He just wanted to make it all consolidated quickly, and we're gonna cast it in bronze and then later on gold plate. So one of the prime reasons you'd want to use a liquid rubber mold or RTV is when the model such as this, which has the carving wax base, is not going to handle vulcanized pressure and heat. So if I was to put this in the vulcanizer, it would just turn into a puddle, and it would not come out very nicely. So this, I can set it, obviously it's liquid, it takes 24 hours to set up, and then you end up with something like this. This is the mold of the pommel, and we did another one here of the lobes. I'll explain this a little bit more in detail later on in the video. Something to note about this particular product is that humidity degrades it. So it's very important that you keep all of these molds in a sealed bag or in like a Tupperware or something like that. And even the bottle itself, it says humidity degrades the product, cured or uncured, so you have to be very mindful of that. These are not as durable as vulcanized rubber. They will, as I said, degrade with time, and they just get really floppy, and then they don't hold any of the injection wax properly, or the details get lost, things like that. Now that said, I've used this product for about 2 years now, and I still have the first mold I ever made, and it's still in perfect shape. So it's not like it happens overnight or within the first few injections. It just takes quite a while for it to happen. And I find the detail that you can get with this stuff to be very, very good. Like I was saying, there's filigree involved with this, so all the very fine lines of the rope. That stuff all comes out quite nicely, depending on your injection process, of course, depends on the wax. But anyway, so let's dive into this, and we'll explain a little bit more how this works. All right, so I'm not using the best scale. This just came from a hardware store. It's nothing fancy. I don't really care too much about those 2 decimal places over here. They, I mean, it's accurate enough to just round to the nearest one. So this is 0.7. I'm going to round up to like 23 grams. This one's 0.28. I'll just round that to 227. It should be. It's always been fine. I haven't noticed that much of a difference between them. Anyway, so we're going to weigh the glass and tare that to 0. And we're going to be very careful not to overdo this. So remember, 227. Something I forgot to mention before is that this stuff needs to be vacuumed. Oh, 229. So like literally nothing. There we go. And this stuff is still good, so I'm just gonna put that right back into there. Good. Wipe that off. This stuff gets messy fast, so I strongly recommend, if you want to do this or do a lot of this, like dedicate a setup to it, because it gets, just really gross. Sorry, now that I've got stuff on my hands, it's gonna get more difficult. Anyway, we're at 227, and I need to get this up to 250. So very, very slowly. This is the one that you cannot really mess up on. You don't have an option. And there we go. 250 grams exactly. I'm going to tighten these up because, as I mentioned before, they do get affected by humidity, and that is in a cured and uncured state. And now we're just going to start to mix this. The instructions specifically say mix for 4 minutes. I think that's kind of just a guideline, as long as you've got everything mixed together really nicely, like you don't see any of these little wavy lines of the catalyst and the rubber unmixed. Something I did forget to mention before, sorry, I tried to talk about it earlier. This product requires vacuuming. So if you're in the casting business, you probably already have a vacuum handy. If you don't, there are techniques to get around that. I believe you have to heat this stuff up. You can put it in like an empty rice cooker, and that will actually help this RTV, or not the RTV, this Liqui-Cast set up faster. It takes 24 hours typically, like just at room temperature, which is great if you're trying to mold, say, like a wax ring or something, an original that you really, really need to keep, or you're worried about it not burning out properly, say you're casting a material you're not familiar with. So you can let that set up over 24 hours and then you cut it out. Or if it's another material, say it's like a bone or a natural material, you can put it in an empty rice cooker and just turn it on basically for about 2 hours, and it will harden up pretty quick. It takes not too long, and then you have to let it cool off, and then you can cut it open. So I think we're pretty well mixed. Let's pick up the camera and let's go over to the vacuum. All right, so here we're at the vacuum. This is just like a standard 2-in-1 vacuum system. It's Liqui-Cast by Arby. If you've been following our videos, you've probably seen this before. Little tip for those who might want to do this. I put that piece of paper under there because there's a couple of holes. And because this is a solid glass surface, it makes a nice suction. And I've had suction underneath it, and then I had to use like a knife to like pry it up, and it wasn't ideal. But anyway, so we're gonna put this in there. This is going to expand a lot. It almost fills like right up to the top of the brim. But it's not a big deal. I'm gonna watch it, and if it does start to overflow, then I'll release and start it up again until it goes. So this stuff needs to boil all the way up and then drop. And as soon as it's done, it won't do that again. So when you put it into your mold and you have to vacuum out all the air, it's not gonna boil over again, ideally. So anyway, let's get this started. All right, so that's the first vacuuming. Now that that's done, I'm just gonna move the camera again. All right, now it's been vacuumed. Move the camera down, and I'm doing this on a piece of metal plate that kind of acts as my like a spill guard, I guess. If any molten metal falls on the table, it doesn't burn the wood. The other nice thing is that if I make any drips with this stuff, the rubber doesn't really like to stick to anything, so it peels up really, really easy. It's not ideal what I'm doing here, pouring directly on top of the model. Ideally, you want to pour up the sides of the model and let the material fill, and that applies with plaster or this Liqui-Cast, silicone RTV, anything like that. And the reason for that is the model can break free, and then your model floats to the surface, and you've got to clean it all off and start all over again, basically. And if it's like plaster for casting, then you don't have more than 10 minutes, and you may have to toss your entire batch, which if you're a small business like me, that could be a cost that you really don't want to do if you don't, or really want to pay if you don't have to. But anyway, I was careful, and I'm going to fill this right up to the top just because I've got the material for it. Can't hurt. There we go. Didn't really make any mess, amazingly. So I'm going to set this bowl aside to cure, and basically all of this will just peel right off. It's actually quite nice for that, for cleanup. Trouble is when it gets everywhere and then you got a whole lot of cleanup. Anyways, all right, so we put the mold back in the vacuum, put the dome over top, and vacuum it out. All right, so that is the final vacuuming. And now that this is done, we're going to set this, actually, you know what? I'm gonna leave this in here because, as I mentioned, it does get affected by humidity. So at least inside this small dome, it's not extremely affected by it. You know, better than being out in my studio and being affected to any temperature change there. All right, so this is the mold that I took of this piece right here. You can see that it comes out as like a solid brick. You can write on it, so you have, it's good for labeling. You can write on any surface depending on how you store them. And I had to cut this by hand with a scalpel. I use I think it's number 12. It looks like a claw, and it's good for getting, specifically for these lobes. You can get this in one little swoop, and these help lock everything together. So there should be no slide back and forth on the top, on the side, or anything. Like, you want this to be seamless so that you don't get, you know, one of those hard lines along the edge where this goes. Oops, this way. Like that. So this is now ready for injecting. The injecting has kind of consolidated everything. We got really good detail on all the filigree. It's kind of hard to see because it's all inside. Let's see if I can bring this up for you. So there's the inside of the mold. It turned out really well. You can see all the little lines of that filigree, like the rope. And yeah, so we're gonna inject a few of these for him. He has his own casting setup, but we decided to help him out with this. So in the next part of the video, I'm going to show you how I cut this open and extracted the master, and some of the little tricks and things that I do, you know, like this scalloping here to make sure everything lines up, and how you get these lobes, things like that. Okay? For doing this cutting, we're going to be using a real scalpel. I use number 12 non-sterile surgical blades, and I specifically use number 12s because of the shape. I really like that hook or claw shape. It helps get into some of the details really nicely. And when you're trying to cut the lobes open, it really helps because you can just kind of do a little turn of the blade, and it can create that entire shape almost in one go. So anyway, this is the solid brick of the Liqui-Cast, and because I don't do this very often, I'm going to give myself as much help as possible, and I'm going to divide it in half, just using this this Staedtler marker. Like I said, I don't do this very much, so there may be some technique that that would be better, but this is what I've kind of taught myself, and it seems to work out just fine. So you'll notice under this Liqui-Cast brick, I've got a little hook. I made that hook out of an old rasp. It was like a farrier's rasp, and basically I just heated it up, cut it off, bent it over into a hook shape, sharpened it up just a little bit, and drilled 2 holes, and mounted it to the underside of the bench. It works okay. There are products you can buy that work a little bit better, like what are they called? Like spreaders, I guess, or just like clamps and stuff in general. And they all work. It really just depends on, I guess, how much you do this. If you may want to make a business out of this, then maybe you better invest in some of the nicer tools. But, you know, as I said before, I don't do this all that often, so it's not something I wanted to drop a whole lot of money into. So what I've done so far is I've just dragged the blade through the center line, about 1/8 of an inch deep, and I'm going to start doing the lobes now. I'm going to change the camera angle in a second, but basically what I'm doing is applying pressure on 1/2, and then at about a 45-degree angle, I apply, I just slice through just ever so slightly, and I'm going to show you how to finish this off a little bit later. But yeah, you kind of rely on that hook to provide the necessary tension. The blade obviously is super sharp, so it doesn't require a whole lot. And this is the one little, oops, oh, danger. There we go. So this is the one little motion. I kind of flick around, like it's a slight turn. It's kind of hard to see. I'm going to be doing more of these, obviously. There's 4, one in each corner. So 45-degree angle up, 45-degree angle up, and then use the hook, get right in there, and a little turn around. There you go, that's the lobe. And then from there, as soon as you got all 4 of these done, you can go back to the middle and start to divide the halves even more. You notice I do a little bit of a wiggle in there. What those little wiggles do is they create little scallops inside the 2 halves that, just like the corner lobes, they help to make sure that the 2 halves go together exactly the way they were meant to. So you avoid a flashing line, basically. A flashing line is I'm sure everyone's seen it, is a straight line up, say something that's been forged, like drop forged, where you've got a top and a bottom half coming together. And this can happen in this process as well. And it's very easy to clean up and wax. So you just kind of you could use the scalpel or a craft knife or something, and just scrape it off. So we're just going to continue on cutting the mold. I like to work all 4 sides, so I'll do one, move on to the next, and just keep going in a clockwise or counterclockwise motion. It doesn't matter too much. But bearing in mind that there will be spots that get a little bit softer, I suppose, like as they get thinner. As you're working your way towards the master in the middle, there's less and less material holding them together. So you got to be mindful of that and just take it slow and steady. And I know this particular master has a hollow center, so I got to figure out where that is. Because I didn't mark it, I don't know off the top of my head. So I can tell that I'm pretty much near the end of the process. So I can start to see the master, and I'm going to slowly separate it from the half, because you can see there's little bits of rubber that are stretching, like they're kind of stuck in the undercut. So to preserve as much of that detail as possible, I'm going to try and open this up equally, and we're kind of getting hung up on the hollow center of this thing, but just another quick couple of cuts and that will be free. So that's pretty much it. If you haven't watched our other video about vulcanized rubber and you're more interested in that, then feel free to check it out. If you like this video, like and subscribe, and check out our social media.